What's up, guys? So before I start today's video, I just want to start out by saying I currently do not use any drugs. I am sober and I do not recommend any drugs. This is not a glorification. This is just me speaking on my experience. So at the current moment, I am 30 years old. I've been off of hard drugs for the better half of 3 years. Now, this is a story about the first time I tried heroin. To start, I gotta take you back to when I was a teenager, probably around 15. So I had used opioids around this age for the first time, and I remember feeling like I kind of loved them. Growing up from probably 15 to 18, I tried most of the drugs out there. I never tried heroin at that point, but I tried basically everything else, including opiate pills. And I always loved the opiate pill, but had a very hard time acquiring them. So I really never had the chance to use them very consistently. I remember it was around, I think I was 19 years old when the first time I ever got introduced to heroin. And it's funny because that same day I actually had taken Percocet. So to start, that day I came into work and I remember one of the waitresses I was working with, I was at an Applebee's at the time as a waiter. She came up to me and offered me a bottle of Percocet. There was a bunch of, I think, 5 milligram perks in there. I want to say it was like 80 or 90 milligrams total. I bought the whole bottle and I ended up taking the whole thing throughout the day at work, and I got pretty high. At this time I did not have an opioid tolerance. I seemed to naturally tolerate quite a bit of them. I remember I would always take more pills than my friends, but I was still pretty high. And anyway, fast forward, I get out of work and I go to a buddy's house, and we just go to chill and smoke and hang out. And this guy is just like me. We're both trying a lot of drugs at this age. We like to get messed up. So I tell him, like, I'm high on perks. I took a bottle. And he's like, damn, man. He's all jealous because I didn't save any for him. And I suppose this got him feeding a little bit for, some kind of high like that. And he's like, starts thinking, he's like, hey, I know this guy actually that goes to the hood like every day to get heroin. And at this point, I was like, sounds risky, but you know what? Like, this Percocet high is wearing off, and I've kind of always been curious as to what heroin is like because I love the feeling of opioids. And I was so stupid at that age. Like, I had seen older people crash out and lose their lives completely over this drug, heroin. But yeah, I'm thinking like, nah, that won't happen to me. Like, I just want to try it, I didn't get addicted to anything else at this point. So he ends up calling the dude, and the guy's like, yeah, I'm going down later. So we wait hours for the guy, right? But finally, the guy shows up. It's him, and there's two girls in the car, and then me and my friend. So it's a full car at this point, with all of us in it. And we take about a 30-minute drive down to the hood, and we meet his guy, and we get the stuff. Mind you, this is the first time I have really gone down to the hood to buy any kind of drugs like these, and I was kind of nervous. I didn't know what to expect. You know what I mean? As we're driving off, the guy's like starts loading a crack pipe and takes a huge hit and starts vomiting all over himself. And that's at that point I started to get pretty I don't know, uncomfortable with this whole situation because I don't trust this guy driving. He's doing drugs behind the wheel. I'm worried we might get pulled over. We still got to drive a whole 45 minutes or so away to drop one of these girls off, and then he's got to go back to drop us off. So I'm like praying that we even make it, right? I haven't done any heroin at this point, but we have the drugs. So we drive about 45 minutes, go to some apartment complex to where these girls are supposed to be dropped off, and they all start loading up their shot of heroin in the car. Me and my friend, we obviously are not shooting up, but he gives me my bag. I dump it out onto a little platform, make a nice line. And looking back now, I realized it was a pretty fat bag he got me. I did the whole thing. Mind you, I had already taken Percocet that day. But when this hit me, let me tell you, it was like way stronger than the Percocet I took. I took 80, 90 milligram Percocet too. But this one bag of heroin was way stronger, and it just came on differently. But I remember I sniffed that bag and I sat back, And I remember looking, it was nighttime, and I remember looking at all the lights in this little complex parking lot we were sitting at, and everything just started to look very warm and bright and glowing, and everything just started to feel perfect. That's the best way I could describe it. I just felt this warm rush come over my body, and all the nervousness I was feeling in that moment about us, you know, not making it home, getting pulled over, just seemed to vanish. Like, I did not care anymore. I was like, I feel so good right now. Anything could happen. It's okay. Like, I mean, that's crazy, right? Anyway, so they all do their shit. The girls leave, or at least one of them left. I don't really remember. But anyway, now the guy driving at this point, he is messed up. Okay, after he shot up, he's barely functioning, and he's driving. And he's pulling out of the parking lot onto a street, and he's swerving, and he's hitting the curb, and I start to think like, oh my god, yeah, I'm high as hell right now, so I'm not that worried, but I'm like, still like, okay, what are we gonna do? Now, just as I'm thinking that, I see red and blue lights right behind us, and it's the cops. Great, right? So we get pulled over, and yeah, it was me, my friend, the driver, and there was still one girl in the car, so it was still almost a full car. And I'm thinking for sure, like, we're screwed, because there's like needles on the ground, there's bags that they used like ripped up all over the floor. I mean, there's still a lot of drugs in the car too. And so the cop, he rolls up to the window of the driver with his flashlight out, and the driver is like slurring his words. He's really high. The cop's like, hey, why are you swerving? Driver's like, oh, I dropped my phone. I was just trying to get it on the ground, And the cop looks at him and says, all right, step out of the car for a moment. So I'm like, yeah, that's it, we're done. He steps out the car. The cop sees right on the seat where the guy was sitting a syringe that he was just using. And the cop says, oh, what's that needle there? Now, I don't know if there was a miracle that was happening this night or what, but the driver says, oh, I'm a diabetic. It's my diabetic needles, all messed up, like half nodding out. And the cop looks at him for a second. He looks at the rest of us, and he says, okay, just be safe driving. Lets him back in the car, pulls off, and lets us go. Now, I think that cop had to know. We're up to no good. Like, there's no way you're gonna see a car full of young teenagers and young adults, high out of their minds, look sketchy as hell in a known drug using area, and then you see paraphernalia on the seat and you believe the story that the guy's a diabetic. I don't know. I think we got really lucky. Anyway, we make it back home finally, and on that ride home I got very nauseous because it was really high, and I was just completely nodded out in another world at this point. It feels like I'm floating on a cloud, but I'm barely conscious, and the girl with me on the back seat is constantly tapping on my shoulder, making sure I'm still awake. This is like by far the highest I had been on any opiate. And I remember we get back to my friend's house, and I just kind of collapsed on the floor because it's like I felt so good and just so like sadic. I couldn't walk, I was like just floored. And yeah, that was the first time I ever tried heroin, and I was, like I said, 19, I believe. After that night, it's not like I started using it again right away. I probably would have had I had access to it, but I did not have any access to it. I didn't really know this guy. It was a whole sketchy experience that I wasn't trying to really do again anyway. But now, in coming years, I did end up finding access to it, and that's a story for another time as to where that led me. But for now, I'll leave it off with that. And that was the story of my first time trying heroin and miraculously not getting arrested.